Welcome to week 13. We will be covering chapter 7, which is all about cognition. So looking at the ways in which we think, how we measure and assess intelligence, and then how we use language. So this is the to-do list for this week, and this is going to be a really quick podcast. We don't have a ton going on this week aside from the quiz. But your learning objectives are obviously going to be geared towards getting you ready for thinking about these three aspects of cognition. So first and foremost, taking a look at sort of developmentally how we process information. So the definition of cognition, as well as how we process mental images, and how our brain makes sense of the sensory information that we take in, any echoic information, sound, sights, and how that kind of gets processed into then what we spit out, which is our thinking. We'll look at some of the different methods used to solve problems and used in decision making, as well as some barriers to that. A really fun aspect of this field is looking at characteristics of divergent thinking and creativity. So looking at sort of the outside the box thinkers, what is unique about people who think outside the box, who come up with ideas that aren't the norm, that wouldn't normally be on the forefront of somebody's mind. And so that's sort of like a fun thing to look at, and we'll be touching on that a little bit with our discussion posts this week, looking at multiple intelligence. We'll contrast and compare the theories on intelligence. Where does it come from? How do we measure it? What are the ways in which we can identify it? Again, touching on multiple intelligence and the theory of intelligence as not being just one concrete structure. We'll look at things like giftedness and emotional intelligence, which is getting a lot more momentum today in research, as we're starting to understand it's not just about sort of traditional ways of looking at intellect, things that we can, concretely measure, like our knowledge in terms of breadth of what we've learned, or not even things that we can assess, like we think of academic types of rigor when it comes to intelligence, but just emotionally how we relate to one another, and how we show that. We'll take a look at the role of heredity and environment on the development of intelligence. And then the last portion of the chapter is going to look at language and how it develops. So it'll tap a little bit into some of the developmental stuff we covered a few chapters back. And hopefully it'll help expand your knowledge there, and just how people are influenced by language. Some interesting stuff about people who are bilingual, and how the brain differs when you're bilingual versus just speaking one language. And we'll also look at some animal research, because a lot of what we understand about language comes from looking at how animals communicate with one another. And then just some methods for improving your thinking. Here are the slides. And the videos this week, we don't have any extra videos. It's just the videos that are in both episode 10, which covers cognition and language, and then episode 11, which covers intelligence. So again, those are in my psych lab. You'll want to be watching for those. Lots of opportunity this week to integrate in the videos and the readings into this discussion question, looking at just how you are intelligent. So the aim of the questions this week is studying this theory of multiple intelligences. What does that mean? Gardner is the name to know here. And how does he define that? He comes up with some categories of intelligence, so you'll want to get familiar with those. And part of the challenge this week is coming up with individuals whom you feel fit each of the 8 categories. And then what kinds of criticism came for this theory of multiple intelligence, which really it's out there. We know about it. It exists. It makes a lot of sense, but it hasn't caught on. We're still very stuck on this idea of one intelligence, which is measured by an IQ. So what were some of the critics here of Gardner's theory? And like I said, you just have a quiz this week on the chapter 7, and that wraps up the week. So please let me know if you have any questions, guys. Thanks.